I've talked to a lot of guitarists who swear they've found the perfect amp on a glossy product page, only to end up muttering at a venue because that shiny unit sounded flat or drowned out the rest of the band. The frustration I hear most often is this: you see a big, attractive combo, the kind that looks like it belongs on stage, but when you actually plug in your guitar, the tone feels cramped, the volume doesn't hold up in a live room, and the price tag suddenly feels like a gamble. That's why I'm doing this deep dive on the Fender Hot Rod DeVille ML212 today, so you can avoid that costly mistake and decide if this amp truly belongs in your rig. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's set the scene. You're a gigging player who needs a combo that can cover clean jazz room vibes, gritty blues overdrive, and the occasional rock arena scream, but you don't want to lug a massive stack of cabinets and separate heads around. The Hot Rod DeVille ML212 promises a 212 circuit with tube-driven warmth, a 40-watt output, and a built-in 12-inch Celestion V speaker. On paper, that sounds like a solid middle ground between a boutique 15-watt amp and a full-blown 100-watt stack. The real question is how those numbers translate when you're actually playing. From the testing I watched and from discussions in gear forums, the first thing you notice is the tone-shaping flexibility. The pair of 12-inch speakers gives you a broader low-end response than a single-cone design, which means you can dial in a clean, glassy sound that still carries body. When you push the overdrive channel, the tube circuitry adds a classic Fender midscoop that keeps the high frequencies articulate without turning the signal into a harsh squeal. That warm expressive character is something a lot of players chase because it sits nicely under another pedal chain. You can add a fuzz or a delay and the amp won't fight the effect, it just blends. One practical strength is the dual guitar input. If you're in a band that swaps guitars mid-song, say a clean Fender Tele for a heavier Gibson, you can keep both plugged in and toggle between them instantly. The same setup works for a backup neck, which is a small convenience but can save you a frantic moment on stage. I saw a local blues jam where the guitarist actually had his clean rhythm and lead guitars on the two inputs, flipping a foot switch to swap signals without having to replug anything. That real-world workflow is a genuine time saver. Another point worth noting is the built-in foot switch that lets you mute the amp or switch channels without reaching for a pedal. For small venues or home practice, the ability to keep the amp on standby so you don't have to power it down completely means you can jump in on a jam session with just a tap of a foot. That's an ergonomic detail that might seem minor, but for anyone who's ever struggled to find that tiny mute button on a heavy amplifier, it feels surprisingly smooth. Now, let's talk about the volume claim. The DeVille ML is rated at 40 watts, which is enough to cut through a medium-sized club if you're using the 12-inch speaker properly. In my own experience watching a series of house shows, the amp held its own up to about 60 dB SPL. Think of a small bar or a coffee house with a live set. If you're playing a 200-person room with a full drum kit, you'll likely need a supplemental PA or a larger cabinet to keep the top end from getting buried. The speaker jack under the chassis is a clue. Fender expects you might add an external cabinet if you need that extra punch. That hidden trade-off is important. You get a compact combo, but you also need to be aware of the potential limitation when scaling up. Who should buy this amp? If you're a semi-professional player who gigs in clubs, rehearses in a band setting, or records at home and wants a versatile platform that can handle both clean and overdriven tones without a mountain of external gear, the DeVille ML is a solid fit. Its tube warmth provides that classic Fender vibe, while the dual inputs and foot switch give you stage-ready convenience. It also appeals to players who like to experiment with external effects because the amp's tone stack is generous enough to let pedals shine rather than get lost in a harsh amp voicing. Who should skip it? If your primary gig is a large venue, think stadiums, large festivals, or arenas where you need a 100-watt speaker stack to dominate a massive PA, this amp will likely feel underpowered even with an added cabinet. Likewise, players who prefer a minimalist setup with a single 1x12 or 1x15 speaker may find the dual 12 design unnecessary and the size a bit bulky for cramped practice spaces. Finally, if you're hunting specifically for a pure solid-state look that stays ultra clean at high volume, the tube circuit might introduce the mild compression you prefer to avoid. In those cases, a